Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock Tuesday news and politics show. 3 o'clock was Ava Gaudet with arts and entertainment. Just before I go to Jennifer Lawless down at American, wanted to give folks an update. There are a lot of updates on GoLocalProv.com right now pertaining to tomorrow's expected snowstorm. Providence schools canceled, General Assembly canceled. A latest update from GoLocal meteorologist John Orsi. So be sure after the show to go to GoLocalProv.com. But while we have you here in studio, we've got Jennifer Lawless at American, and there is a lot going on right now down in DC. Jennifer, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So talk with us a little bit about where things are at with Mueller and Trump and looking into Trump's business dealings in Russia. This seems to be sort of the biggest developments we've seen from Mueller to date as it pertains specifically to Donald Trump and his business holdings. What's the talk down there?
Right. So, the main issue here is twofold. The first aspect of it is whether Mueller is now focusing on obstruction rather than collusion. Okay. And by looking at Trump's business dealings, what he's really trying to gain a handle on, we think, is the extent to which Trump had relationships with Russians where, in suggesting to Michael Flynn or Jeff Sessions or anybody else that maybe they shouldn't be as forthcoming as they might be inclined to be with the general counsel, that there's something to hide. The second aspect of this has to do with the fact that Trump and his team have clearly modified their plans. It wasn't until the weekend that Trump called out Mueller by name and suggested that he's engaged in a witch hunt. It's no longer that the investigation overall is a witch hunt. So Trump and his lawyers are now beginning, I think, to realize that we've reached a point in time where they're no longer willing to keep quiet, and they're no longer willing to suggest that, they'll just play by the rules until the investigation comes to an end. And I'm sure that that was inspired by the fact that Mueller is poking around in Trump's financial dealings.
And let's talk a little bit both about what the purported or potential, as you said, obstruction of justice, not collusion. Anything that comes down from Mueller, grounds for, what would we see if we saw, even if it went to that level, if we saw an obstruction of justice charge?
Well, obstruction of justice is actually easier in terms of grounds for impeachment than collusion, because it's unclear exactly whether collusion is illegal. It's unclear if it's a high crime or misdemeanor. These are tricky things. Obstruction of justice is something that we have experience with. It was part of the articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. So as far as Democrats in the House, or Democrats more broadly who want to see an end to the presidency, the notion that Mueller is focusing on obstruction as opposed to possibly collusion should probably be good news. The downside is that as president of the United States, Donald Trump has some discretion over exactly what he talks to the special counsel about. And it's going to be difficult to sort of nail him down on a lot of these issues. Collusion, if he could get other people ahead of time to say, look, yeah, he called me and he said that, we basically need to figure out a way to keep Hillary Clinton from being president, doesn't really rely on Donald Trump's testimony as much as an obstruction case would.
And of course, Mueller front and center with all the talk down in DC. Any talk again, does Mueller survive? We've discussed this multiple times. If Trump feels that he's under such scrutiny and such pressure, if he does, put the pressure onto Mueller, could that even be a possibility?
Well, Lindsey Graham over the weekend said that if Trump fires Mueller, that will be the beginning of the end of the presidency. And it's not only Lindsey Graham. Susan Collins, other Republican senators came out over the weekend and said pretty much the same thing. Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan have been relatively quiet about this, but the general sense among Republicans on Capitol Hill is that Donald Trump would not be stupid enough to do this. I think that we should caution that optimism, not because Trump is stupid, but because Donald Trump plays to his base. And his base thinks that this is a witch hunt, in large part because he's told them that it's a witch hunt. And Donald Trump also thinks that he is immune to the kinds of punishments and prosecutions that other presidents have had to deal with. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he at least considers ending this investigation. It's tricky, though, because the first thing he would have to do there also is figure out who would replace Jeff Sessions and who could get confirmation under those circumstances.
Keeping an eye on the Mueller investigation, but a lot going on with the personal relationships of the Trumps. Never mind Stormy Daniels. Now we've seen this week with Trump Jr., his divorce, Aubrey O'Day. Here we have another sort of interpersonal dynamic interjected into politics, does this just add to the distraction of what's taking place in DC right now?
Oh, I don't think it adds to the distraction. If anything, I think it's cueing a lot of political junkies to think about Monica Lewinsky and Paula Jones. You know, the special counsel into Bill Clinton was tasked with trying to figure out if something illegal was done regarding Whitewater and other financial and real estate deals. And it was throughout the course of that investigation that Bill Clinton was deposed and ultimately lied about sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky in the Paula Jones sexual harassment suit. So the more and more that we see with Stormy Daniels or other women coming forward, either about shady non-disclosure agreements or affairs that Donald Trump is denying, I think the more and more we're beginning to see potential parallels to the kinds of things that ultimately took Bill Clinton down. We know that Donald Trump has a problem with the truth, and the worst thing for him would be a deposition or an actual testimony. And that doesn't necessarily mean to Robert Mueller. It could even be in a case regarding a woman who feels that he treated her poorly.
And we just saw the news today, a judge tossed out opposition from Trump to try to deny a lawsuit in New York. This is the latest that this potential legal proceeding is moving forward.
That's right. So there was a 2007 Apprentice contestant who said that Trump grabbed her in a way that he shouldn't have grabbed her. The judge not only refused to throw out the suit, but the judge also said that it was not going to be tabled until the presidency was finished. So this is something that Donald Trump is going to have to deal with in real time. And the more and more flustered and frustrated he gets about that, the more likely he is to behave in a way that might not be in his best interest when it comes to Stormy Daniels or even Bob Mueller's investigation.
Well, we're going to continue to keep an eye on Mueller, keep an eye on Stormy Daniels, things taking place in D.C., but just mentioned New York, and one of the things I want to discuss with you, Cynthia Nixon tossing her hat in the political ring. Does she have a chance?
No. I mean, look, I think it's great that people are energized to run for office. I think it's especially great when we see women who are running progressive candidacies. But Andrew Cuomo has been a pretty progressive ally for most groups that are interested in putting forward, a more liberal agenda in New York. And I think an example of that is Congressman Maloney from upstate New York, who's in the New York delegation, the only open gay member of the delegation, said that, Andrew Cuomo is the best that they could ever expect or want or have the privilege of serving with, And so when you've got really, really progressive members of the political establishment encouraging her not to run in the first place, it makes it difficult to see how this translates into anything more than a celebrity kind of campaign. Now, I could be wrong, but of all of the Democratic politicians that are out there, I really don't see Andrew Cuomo as particularly vulnerable in a primary.
Cuomo not vulnerable in New York. You did just have comments about this is the Illinois 3rd Congressional Democratic primary. Speaking of progressive versus not quite progressive, and Vox.com, you might have called someone insane?
I might have called somebody insane. The Republican, though, not the Democrat.
Yes.
The Democrat's just a crummy Democrat. So in this Illinois congressional district, Dan Lipinski is the Democratic incumbent, and he's facing a pretty strong primary challenge from a woman. The election is tonight. And the reason that she has a very good chance of winning this district is not only that it's a far more Democratic district than Lipinski's voting record would suggest, but also because the likely Republican nominee is a Holocaust denier. And so this is one of those rare opportunities where the Democrats can knock out a moderate or socially conservative Democrat, replace that person with somebody who is a real Democrat with true democratic values, a progressive agenda, and not undergo any kind of political risk for the general election, because there's no way that this Republican candidate could take back the seat. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the few incumbents defeated. And this is not a situation like Conor Lamb in Philadelphia or outside of Philadelphia last week. This is a situation where you've got a pretty solidly blue district. So the fact that Lipinski is out of sync on a woman's right to choose, as well as a wide variety of other issues, suggests that that district could probably get better representation with very little political risk.
And you mentioned it being a blue district, and you mentioned the Republican challenger being a Holocaust denier. Is this just a gift to the Democrats?
It's a gift to the Democrats if they decide to seize it, right? So this is one of these opportunities where there was no chance whatsoever, if Lipinski was the nominee, that the Republican would win the race, right? But most people don't take on incumbents because I can tell you from personal experience, it's hard and there's an incumbency advantage and these things are real.
Yes.
But this is one of those opportunities where the Democrats can actually move the needle in a far more progressive direction with no risk, as long as voters are willing to, throw out an incumbent. And that's just rare, but I think this is one of those few districts where it's likely.
Well, we'll see the results of the Democratic primary in Illinois. One of the last things I wanted to talk with you while we have you here in studio, Jennifer, is what's going on with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, and not just looking at Facebook from the data mining perspective unto itself, but its implications in the political sphere.
I've got to tell you, when I logged onto Facebook this morning, I can't even count the number of people that said they were leaving Facebook.
Wow.
I think the idea that this is a place, first of all, where people post their innermost thoughts, their favorite photos. I mean, it's basically an archive of people's lives, right? It's a social media diary. The fact that that has been compromised in a way where it can affect elections past, elections present, and elections future is disconcerting. But beyond that, Facebook's response has really not, I think, met the, sort of met people's expectations. And so I think as far as campaigns and elections are concerned moving forward, there are going to be opportunities to mine social media outlets like Facebook to target voters or to plant fake news or to do whatever else. But I also think that these campaigns and elections have to realize that individual users might be far more inclined to just leave these platforms altogether because they're the adults in the room now, right? It's the potential voters who are saying, wait a minute, I'm not giving up everything so that people can figure out, my day in and day out routine. And the fact that Facebook is not coming up with a broad, far-reaching policy to make subscribers feel better about this in the very short run is probably detrimental.
Is this a really watershed moment for Facebook and the future of Facebook? There's been discussions in past years. It's become such a monolith, such a monopoly. And now, as you said, logging on and seeing people, I saw posts today too, people saying, hey, I'm taking a break. I have to say, I've got friends across the political spectrum, definitely saw more on the left saying such, I think perhaps as a result of the election outcome. Do we see a different sort of Facebook? Do we see a different platform? Does this change politics?
I don't know. I mean, I think if everything stayed exactly the same, then I think it has the potential to change politics in that Facebook data can be mined and the people who remain on Facebook are going to be more likely to then be the people that are targeted in these kinds of elections. But I also think that Mark Zuckerberg and everybody else at Facebook have bottom line concerns. And I'm not sure that they're going to be willing to just say, okay, whoops, like we gave it was a good decade. We gave it a shot, right? So my bet is that they're going to now start taking very seriously ways to modify the platform or issue more protections or ensure that there's less hacking or data mining. But what we saw with Cambridge Analytica is, it's unclear exactly what they did that was wrong. It was they accessed information that was available and then they used it in a way that could affect election outcomes. But I mean, there wasn't anything necessarily nefarious or illegal about what they did.
So much going on inside the Beltway. I know you're expecting some snow down there, as are we. Again, letting folks know lots of updates on GoLocal. But besides keeping an eye in the skies, what else are you watching down in D.C.?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. There's likely going to be another firing this week. It's unclear who. I mean, maybe it'll be John Kelly, maybe it'll be Veterans Department. But what we have seen pretty consistently is the Friday afternoon firing as a way to at least take a little bit of the heat off the other news that the administration doesn't want. Last week, it was Andrew McCabe. And so, my sense is that we'll be well served to continue to look at who else is going to be shifting around. And Donald Trump, quite frankly, has basically foreshadowed that this is going to be taking place. He said that there's going to be a reshuffling not only in the cabinet, but even among his legal team. And he reached out to Ted Olson today to see if he would join that legal team. That would be a very, very big name. Apparently, he's considering it, and he's speaking with his law firm about any potential conflicts of interest.
Well, lots to keep an eye on down there. And as always, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in up here to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Jennifer Lawless, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Jennifer Lawless down at American University. Mueller, Trump, Facebook, Stormy Daniels, Trump Jr., everything that is being talked about. We get the Inside the Beltway scoop from Jennifer down in D.C. Appreciate your time as always. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest, hitting on an issue a little closer to home here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome in David Riley. Thank you so much for taking the time to come in today. It's kind of an apropos time to be in, not just because of an upcoming meeting. We are talking about the effort that the Friends of India Point Park have been working on for years now to bury power lines at the scenic location for both aesthetic and economic reasons. Lots of talk regarding snowstorms about burying lines, but this has been going on for years. Now there's a siting board meeting taking place coming up, but again, this effort has been going on for a long time. So tell folks how you got involved in the effort, really carried the torch and said, we need to bury power lines at India Point Park because why?
Well, Indian Point Park, as is pretty obvious, is the waterfront of the capital city of the Ocean State. And happens to be the only area in the interstates in Rhode Island, in the Ocean State, that has a water view. So it's a strategic location. It's on 195, obviously, Route 195, which has 60 million cars entering and leaving the city a year. So it's very strategically located. It's very popular. There's 200,000 people a year who use the park, according to the Parks Department, and increasing with the linear park now that connects the East Bay Bike Path to the park. So it's a very popular park. There's 20,000 people who gather there on July 4th and lots of other events as well. So what happened was that in 1996, they did an environmental impact statement for the relocation of 195. And at that point, some people in the community said, you got to move the power lines for the highway. Why not bury them?
Why not just bury them?
Why not bury them?
And their response was?
That it would be, quote unquote, a betterment, and therefore it couldn't be paid for by Transportation Department funds. At that time, the National Grid was saying that it would cost $5 to $6 million to bury them.
Okay.
And we
this is 1996.
1996, correct. And then what we first we started Friends of Indian Point Park in 2000, basically because trees don't vote. We figured somebody needs to be an advocate for this beautiful park.
Yep.
There's now many Friends of the Parks groups, which is great. And we thought, why not bury them when you got to move them anyway? And we tried to contact National Grid, which was called Narragansett Electric at the time. They literally did not return our calls until finally we got a little bit of money to hire a consultant. And then they returned our calls, but they actually have, even then, in 16 years, we've been working on this for 16 years, they still have not met with us, which is very contrary to the policies of the parent company of National Grid, which is National Grid in the United Kingdom. And they have very strong written policies about working with local communities, finding out what their concerns are. This National Grid Rhode Island has not met with us once in 16 years.
And you're continuing to push the issue, and you've worked with stakeholders, the city council, because it does take money to make this happen, but you found places that could enable this to happen, and you've got a breakdown sheet which we'll include afterwards. But where could this money come from to enable this to happen?
Well, in fact, what happened is that the Attorney General at the time, Patrick Lynch, championed this cause, and National Grid, other people went to him and said, look, lay off. He said, no, I'm not laying off. And so he was very instrumental in we've raised $18 million. And some of that was, more than half of it was a refund that, I won't go into all the explanation, but there was $1.71 a month that ratepayers would have gotten for 1 year.
Okay.
Because of a refund. That was not given to them and set aside for burying the power lines. Plus, that's got a lot of interest, so it's now over $9 million, just that piece of it.
Okay.
And so it's 18 total, and there could be another 9, so it may be 27 million that's available, which we say at least bury some of the lines. If it's now or never, if after 16 years none of these lines get buried, it's going to be, well, they propose to replace towers that are 100 years old. So if those towers are replaced, they're going to be around another 100 years. They're going to dominate the waterfront for another 100 years.
So they're already looking at doing something to the waterfront with the towers themselves. So your argument is if you have to do something, we're going to continue to push the advocate for burying these power lines. So talk with us about the process and where we're at with the siting board hearing coming up.
Well, there's a siting board hearing a week from yesterday on Tuesday the 27th. Today, what, Tuesday or Wednesday?
Today's Tuesday,
A week from today. A week from today, at 1 p.m. at the Public Utilities Commission office, which is 89 Jefferson Boulevard in Warwick, right off of exit 15. And we've been attending these hearings for years. It's been going on for 16 years. Under the current chair, there have been hearings regularly since 2013. And so we like members of the public to come and support, which we do at every hearing, burying the power lines. What's going to happen at this hearing is that the siting board is going to hear our request. We have actually appealed to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. When I say we, the City of Providence, Friends of Indian Point Park, and 2 waterfront businesses. There's 4 petitioners. They're asking the Rhode Island Supreme Court to overrule the siting board's decision to leave all the power lines overhead for the next 100 years.
And you've got some legal firepower too, don't you?
We have legal firepower, yes. Former State Attorney General Jeffrey Pine is representing the city, and former State Attorney General Patrick Lynch, who we've been working with all these years, is representing Friends of Indian Point Park and the Hilton Garden Hotel, which is right by the park, and the Rhode Island Seafood Festival, because they will stand to be hurt economically. And of course, we stand to be hurt aesthetically and recreationally. And there's 8 out of 10, actually 9 out of 11 government agencies, state and local, have said these power lines should be buried.
9 out of 11. Well, we're certainly going to list them when we put this up, and you're watching and you're reading tomorrow at GoLocal Prov. I mean, there's a lot of potential for development. There's the old Shooters property that is looking to be made into more there. We've seen that kind of staying there for now, but there's plans for that. We've seen the ferry's been coming in and out.
Exactly.
I mean, if folks are watching, I mean, how much would this mean to Rhode Island to, again, have? Do you have a potential visual here of what it could?
I don't know if it'll work, but this shows when people arrive by ferry in the city, this is what they see. They don't see an inviting waterfront destination. They see an industrial backwater, essentially, or at least the remains of industrial backwater. And that could be changed, as it has been in other cities. In San Antonio, they buried power lines on the riverfront, and San Antonio is now the second most popular destination in Texas after the Alamo.
Wow. Well, again, lots of folks go to India Point. As you mentioned, the festivals, you've got the boathouses there, you've got the hotel there, and you're urging folks to turn out next Tuesday to say,
We are.
let's show some firepower that folks want these
Right.
power lines buried.
Correct. 1 o'clock at the, it's called the Energy Facility Siting Board, which is kind of an offshoot of the Public Utilities Commission. It's at their office, Public Utilities Commission office, 89 Jefferson Boulevard in Warwick, and then they're going to hear the arguments from 1 to 2, and at 2 o'clock they're going to make a decision about whether to approve our motion for a stay, which is saying, don't do anything further until the Supreme Court hears this case.
Okay, so hinging on some legal action here. It's 2018.
It is.
Did you think you'd be fighting this battle for 18 years since the Friends of India Point Park started in 2000?
Yeah, well, roughly 16 years. We were hoping not, but National Grid is a powerful lobby, very powerful, and we will continue to fight them. We have 50 organizations that have supported burying the power lines. We have 30 groups that are supporting it, are going to sign on to an amicus brief on this case, and it needs to be done. It needs to be done for the future of this not just the city but the state.
Well, again, with that, looking at replacing the towers there, this is a critical juncture that India Point Park is at. And David Riley, I appreciate your taking the time to come in. We'll have more links to Friends of India Point Park and more information tomorrow when this piece is up. But I appreciate your taking the time to come in and talk about it.
One more thing,
Please go right ahead.
Well, I just was going to say, it's not just about the park. In fact, it's really about the connection between the environment and economics. For example, some people say, well, oh, this is just merely aesthetics. And the answer to that is, what is water fire? Is water fire an aesthetic experience or is it an economic asset? It's clearly, it brings 100 million people to $100 million to the city a year. And it's an economic asset because it's an aesthetic experience. Same thing could happen here. There's 10 million people a year who ride straight through Providence on the way to the Cape and the islands. If we could get 1% of them to stop at a more attractive waterfront, that would bring another 100 million a year into the economy.
Making the economic argument for burying the power lines at India Point Park. David, again, I appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you very much.
We'll walk around the corner. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome our next guest in, Amy Gardner. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
back in the studio here. Again, leading the charge, we've had you quoted many times on GoLocal, Rhode Islanders against the HPV vaccine mandate, something you have worked and advocated for. But now there's another issue of concern at the General Assembly that you are keeping a close eye on as it pertains to health in the state, and that's why I wanted you in. Pertains to health records, and you wanted to talk about it here, so tell us your concerns.
Yes, it's a bill. There's one on both the House and the Senate side, and it's tracking all Rhode Island residents, adults, and the medical records. The Department of Health is advertising it as a vaccination database, but the bill is about a paragraph and a half long.
That's not very long.
No, so it's extremely vague. There's basically no limits. There's nothing that's actually going to keep them within reasonable realm. And even better is if you go, their database already currently exists called KidsNet.
Okay.
And currently it tracks all children up to age 18. Now, in my opinion, this database should already not exist because this paragraph and a half bill is the same thing for the kids. So it's already extremely vague for our children's records. But now this is not an opt-in and this is not an opt-out. If this bill passes, this is every Rhode Island resident being added to this KidsNet database through the Department of Health, including any third-party approved provider. And that, again, vague.
So is it a lot of, clearly, as you said, just a paragraph, the vagueness of it. I mean, even if the Department of Health were to put forth multiple pages of ensuring privacy protections, I'm sure you'd still be going through with a fine-tooth comb.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I would only say this is okay if it's opt-in.
Okay.
You sign yourself up for it. No matter how many provisions there are for it, I find it way over intrusive to auto-enroll every single Rhode Island resident.
And what have your discussions been with folks so far with this? I'm sure you're using the database that you've used pertaining to your advocacy work last year. What's the reaction that you've heard from folks?
So many people are not even aware that their children are in this database. So it's definitely a very shock factor of what, and I think not. So yeah, it's not okay by any means, and it's happening right now, 2018.
And again, the concerns that you have are this information is potentially going to be in the hands of a government agency with, as you said, a paragraph stipulation in the bill about what this could mean. So fear that it could end up in the wrong hands.
Yeah, and the fact that third-party approved vendors get access to this. Currently with the child section of it, every single school nurse has access to it, has a sign-in. Then, like I said, it's way beyond vaccination, but they sell it as a vaccination database. Your social security numbers are in there, everything. It's way too much. And the Department of Health, a government agency, does not need have that much oversight over your medical records.
So would you see, is this the big issue of the year for you?
I personally am much more against this bill than I am excited for the other bills, but don't get me wrong, there's bills to be excited about. We have 3 bills in the House and 1 on the Senate that are working towards what we've been working for 3 years. One in particular on the House side, 7704, is an informed consent bill which will stipulate regulations to make sure that informed consent is given to patients prior to the administration of any vaccination, not just HPV and anything in those realms. So you're not just getting told, because currently we have a lot of feedback, that people are being told from their pharmacist, well, adult goes to pharmacists, but for children, for pediatricians, that you're just being told this is mandated or you should get it with very little information. So this new bill advocates for informed consent. So if you want it, you want it, but you get all of the pros and cons properly before you make that decision.
And you must be working with a national network on this issue as well. Are there states that you think are good example states of addressing this issue that you're modeling your legislative agenda on?
Well, there's some states that are better than others, but they all have issues. So I don't know. I really think of one. I think Maine comes to mind as one that's in pretty good standing for this particular kind of a topic. But they all have battles within this of fighting against databases or against informed consent and fighting for informed consent. So. But I am part of a national network where we're all keeping track of each other's stuff.
So that's one of the ones that you're looking at. What are the other pieces of legislation that you have that you're looking at this year?
Well, we have a duplicate both House and Senate bill, which will make it so that any non-casual contact disease just needs a note, instead of a religious exemption.
Okay.
So you don't have to file that official form. You can just opt out.
Uh-huh.
And that bill will also include that you need to be informed that you have that option. And then on the House side, there is also a bill to add in the philosophical exemption, which is basically what the same thing, the other one, writing a note, basically a philosophical exemption, but only specific to non-casual contact vaccinations. So there's the note for the non-casual contact, the philosophical exemption, the informed consent are all three good bills on the House side. And then you have the bad database bill. And then on the Senate side, you also have the bad database bill. And the note option opt-out is on the Senate side.
So you've got folks, you've got a database, you've got your advocates for looking to make sure that folks know about the HPV vaccine before they even decide to vaccinate their child. But I got to imagine, I think we've talked about this before, how much time do you spend in social media having to dispel myths that perhaps you're not an anti-vaxxer and that this is just simply pertains to the HPV vaccine? How much time do you spend dispelling myths in social media?
Not as much as I used to. I've been pretty consistent with my message.
Do you have a stock one that you drop in just to people, just cut and paste?
No, well, I've been so consistent for so long on my message that most people realize I'm, very much on informed consent, and specifically that, non-casual contact diseases shouldn't be mandated. But yeah, you still have people that just want to spin it. You're against the vaccines, and I'm like, no, go check anything I've posted because nothing says that.
Well, I'll tell you, we've been to events and covered events, and lots of people have turned out, again, the advocates for this. So looking again at the HPV vaccination informed consent legislation, but specifically as well, we'll have information about this legislation you've got concerns with, other folks have concerns with, pertaining to the database, a statewide database building upon a youth one that currently exists. So we'll bring that to folks' attention. We'll have your website up as well. Anything else you want folks to know while you're here in the studio today?
Well, we have a hearing that was scheduled for tomorrow.
Everything's canceled.
With this lovely weather. I just found out literally driving here. But
Rhode Island's canceled.
But we do have pre-written committee emails that you can send out. No HPV mandate. RI.com. You'll see our social media links, and right under them you see send a pre-written email, and you can send out emails and they'll go to the entire committee. You have to click more than one button because there's the House side and the Senate side. But
just be warned.
And it is editable, so if you want to add a couple extra sentences that's personable to what you want, but either way you can send it out, show your support and opposition.
Have you heard from more families and more folks? Part of the HPV vaccine and the issue that you have with informed consent is particular instances of young people who have gotten the vaccine and their personal story. Have you heard from more folks in this past year itself?
Yes, I have. There is a Facebook group, a discussion group. It's for New England, so not just Rhode Island, but all 6 states. It's the focus of people that have gotten the HPV vaccine and then had some kind of adverse reaction or injury, and so parents give each other advice with which doctors they went to and what kind of treatments they did to try to help each other get into a healthier state again. But we've had doctors in Rhode Island where their stepchild or their personal family member had adverse reactions to this vaccine, and according to the CDC VAERS database, in a 4-year time frame, the HPV reported adverse events are 4 times more than every other vaccine reported injury. So that is reason for pause, and that's part of why I advocate so much for informed consent, because if you hear all of this and you know all these details and you still want it, that's your deal. Go for it.
That's informed consent, which you're going to continue to advocate for, and again, against this particular health database bill. Amy, I appreciate you taking the time to come in today.
Yes,
I'm sure we'll talk soon. We'll provide all those links for you if you want to learn more information. I'll let you go around the corner and let folks know a little bit of an update here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Providence School is closed tomorrow. General Assembly is canceled. We have more weather updates from GoLocal meteorologist John Giorsi and more. We'll have, I'm sure, more weather updates moving forward. But wanted to thank you for joining us for another afternoon of GoLocal Live. 3 o'clock was Ava Gaudet with Arts and Entertainment. Kicked off at 4 o'clock with Jennifer Lawless. I want to thank David Riley with Friends of India Point Park, continuing to move forward with their decades-long battle to try to bury power lines there for both aesthetic and, as he pointed out, economic reasons. And Amy Gardner, we've had her in before, providing her take on some legislation pertaining to healthcare, the HPV vaccine, medical health records database. We'll have links to that as well. But we'll be back here in studio tomorrow, downtown Providence, keeping an eye on the weather. We'll have a full lineup for you. We'll provide, again, more updates on Go Local Prov. We look forward to seeing you back in studio. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. I'm Go Local News editor Kate Nagel.